Pero bueno, muchas gracias por venir. Ya es el 10º Congreso Internacional. Me da mucho gusto ver a Guillermo por acá. Nosotros empezamos, Guillermo Calderón de Metrobús, nosotros empezamos hace 10 años para conmemorar y para poder estar conversando sobre un proyecto que cambió mucho la vida, yo creo que de varias ciudades mexicanas, pero va cambiando mucho la vida de esta ciudad en particular, que fue el Metrobús. Cuando hicimos el primero, tenía 3 meses de haber inaugurado Metrobús. Todavía no sabíamos ni si íbamos a poder regularizar la operación de Metrobús. Estábamos peleando con estaciones llenas. Pero había que reconocer que el proyecto estaba instalado en Insurgentes, que teníamos los autobuses corriendo y que ya las cosas iban funcionando de una mejor manera. A partir de ahí, la verdad es que ya han pasado varias cosas. Ya está la construcción de la línea 6. A través del programa de transporte masivo ya estamos con 3 más en operación, o 5 más en operación. Está el Estado de México, está Monterrey, Guadalajara, que empezó temprano, pero no hemos logrado avanzar. Está también Puebla, está Chihuahua. Entonces ya, y vienen varios otros. Todavía no logramos lo que quisiéramos, porque todavía nos falta bastante capacidad institucional. Los proyectos nuevos han sufrido probablemente menos, pero más tiempo que Metrobús en términos de su operación. Y luego vienen otras cosas. Ya hay las bicicletas en la calle, que mucha gente creo que no creía. Y ahí está lo que viene a ser la bici pública en la Ciudad de México, otras ciudades empezándola. Entonces hay un largo camino recorrido desde que empezamos este congreso hace 10 años, pero todavía mucho por hacer. Y dentro de eso, la verdad es que traemos hoy a Robin Chase. Robin viene con un pensamiento bastante revolucionario en términos de cómo se vienen moviendo los sistemas de información, la economía, y cómo eso ha cambiado inclusive la manera de pensar transporte a lo largo del tiempo. Robin es enamorada de transporte, se ha dedicado a él toda la vida, y lo que ha hecho es muy significativo. Ha empezado Zipcar, que es el sistema de renta de carros, de como afiliarse, estar en una membresía y poder usar tu auto. También está Buzzcar y está GoLoco. Todos están basados en una serie de principios comunes, que es el uso de la economía compartido y cómo, en lugar de tener su propio carro y tener tus propios bienes, cómo usar bienes de manera compartida puede cambiar la idea de la movilidad. Yo lo que espero es que esos sean días muy productivos, que realmente vean cosas diferentes, ideas nuevas que están en el mundo sobre transporte, que compartamos dónde estamos en términos de lo que estamos haciendo en México, y que en verdad que esta comunidad cada vez esté más fuerte y podamos hacer mejores proyectos, mejores soluciones, porque en el día con día la verdad es que la hora y media de trayecto en esta ciudad sigue persistiendo para millones de personas. Pues bienvenidos, y es un gusto introducirle a Robin Chase. Por favor, Robin. Y le dejamos, me dejaron una silita, pero yo quiero ver la presentación de Robin.
Thanks, Adriana. I'm going to also stand in front. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And it's a hard thing to decide what to talk to you about. And so I'm going to give you some of many things. I'll be talking about transportation, and I'll be talking about new big ideas, and I'll be talking about why we do this work and why it's important. So let's go. This slide, I wanted you to see, this is the population density per square mile of cities. We know that in the future, today 50% of the population lives in a city, and it's going to be 70% by 2030, by 2050. And what's interesting is when you have all these people living in very dense cities, there is no room for cars. We really have to, for each person to own their own car. And so this slide is very hard to see, but the first one at the top there, that first city that's very small, very less undense, is New York City. And in New York City, only 50% of the families own a car. Farther down is Paris, a little more dense, and 40% of the families own cars. And this third arrow down here is you guys, Mexico City. And I was really surprised to see that 44% of households have cars. It should be, I would think, maybe like 25%. And so this is a very surprising number, and I think is why you're feeling so much traffic congestion. And I think people would much prefer to have many more options, which you guys are offering. So in a city of this density, having so many cars, households be car dependent is tough, which is why you're seeing it. So let me talk a little bit about Zipcar. Zipcar today is the largest car-sharing company in the world. There are 870,000 people who are sharing 12,000 cars around the world, across North America, so in the US and in Canada, in the United Kingdom, recently in Paris, some in, I think, Madrid. Why did we succeed? How is it possible when I started that everyone said, no, Robin, everyone loves their car, they will never ever do a service like this? What I knew was that in cities, if you don't need a car to get to work, this is the most important thing, if you don't need a car to get to work, is stupid to own your own car. Your own car costs about $9,000 a year in the US on average, which is about $25 a day. Every day you're spending $25 a day on your car. And so if you don't take a car to work, that means 5 years in which, 5 days in which you're spending $125 on your car and not using it. So for people who don't need a car to get to work, they want to have access to a car sometimes, and this is why Zipcar worked. And when I think about cities in general, I think our transportation goal is to make sure that people don't need cars to get to work, that they can do their routine lives very happily and easily without using a car. That is a key piece to quality of life in the city and to making people be able to afford to live in cities. Transportation takes up about 20% of the average income is spent on transportation, and for poorer families, it's as much as 40% of their income is spent on travel when they have to own a car. It's really too much. So why was Zipcar successful? There's this idea of excess capacity, and you look at this car and you think, what is she talking about? When we own our own car, we're spending $9,000 a year, but we only drive it 5% of the time. It's only being driven about an hour and a half on average a day, and all the other 95% of the time it is sitting there. It's the second most expensive thing that you own from your house, yet it is sitting there 95% of the time. So there was this huge excess capacity in the way that we could buy cars before. The other way that you could get access to a car was through car rental. And car rental, you still have to get it in a 24-hour bundle, yet I want it for 2 hours, I want it for 1 day and 2 hours. And so there was no way that people could, they always were forced to buy cars much more than they actually wanted them. So Zipcar, I knew we would succeed. I say that now, I didn't know we would succeed. I was sure we would succeed because there was so much excess capacity in the system. The economics of it were so broken that people were buying much, much more car than they actually wanted. They were forced to buy more car. A second reason why I knew we were going to succeed is that we built a platform for participation. We built the website and we built the technology so that it was really, really easy to do. If you're going to rent a car just for an hour, you can't be standing on a line for 15 minutes and waiting, to sign papers. It really had to happen fast. We really had to make it simple for individuals to get in and do what they needed to do. The third is that we thought about our members as our collaborators. They were not consumers, but our co-creators. So if you think about car rental before us, in car rental, there's the customer on that side and the business on this side. And the business knows that the customer is lying, going to ruin the car, is terrible, and the customer knows that the car rental company is going to charge them too much money and is going to be not their friend. And there's this very adversarial relationship. With Zipcar, we said, you know what, we're not going to have a counter at all. You're on our side of the counter. We actually trust you. You are going to walk around the car and see if there was a problem. You are going to make a reservation and choose the exact specific car that you want. You are going to put gas in the car. These were all things that we are now asking our members to do that before Zipcar, which we founded in 2000, was very, very unusual. So we really were thinking of our customers as our friends, and these two pictures, just to show you, which was a very surprising thing for me. I have 3 children, and these photos are people who had their first child, and as they're leaving the hospital with their first child, they say, let's take a picture and send it to Zipcar. So we were really part of their friends, that they would stop at that moment to send us a photo. It's incredible to me. So this idea of people being co-creators, there's a cartoon that I just saw recently. So here's Moses coming down from the mountain, and the caption says, is there a section on the bottom for comments? So today, we believe that even with God, we're co-creators. We get to say, you know, I'm ready to participate. And if we think about that, it's true today. It is true today that we expect to be able to have a say as things. We are not consumers. Consumers is a word that reminds me of 1950. And today, we are participants, and we are collaborators, and we are co-creators. And you can think about many, many things you do that is true today, that we're much, much closer. So going with this idea of these 3 things, what I see in the world is there's a new kind of organizational structure, a new way of building businesses and a new way of working that I'm calling peers incorporated, which has got to be very hard for the translator. I'll explain it in a minute. And so it's how this collaborative economy that is, we are changing from an old industrial economy to a new collaborative economy. And it creates abundant prosperity. And I'll be talking about how this works today, so I'll explain in a minute. The 3 components of this new way of building things are leveraging excess capacity, building platforms for participation, and thinking about people as your co-creators, as your collaborators. So companies, this is happening everywhere, and you didn't even realize it, perhaps. So if you look at these companies here, Facebook and eBay and YouTube and Skype and Wikipedia, all of these things are based on my excess capacity and me as a collaborator. These companies are nothing at all if they didn't have us participating with our extra stuff. So this is a gigantic movement that is happening everywhere, and I will be telling you why that's interesting. So there's Zipcar that was doing this. So you guys know about Car2Go, one-way car rental that is not a competitor with Zipcar because it's for a different kind of use. I think of Car2Go as self-driving taxis. It's when you want to spend a certain amount of money and you need to have a car to do it. Velib, you guys have your own bike sharing here. Again, it's a shared asset that people are active participants in. And this is just a friend that I put in called Scoot Networks, and he's doing electric scooter sharing in San Francisco. You can think about Uber, which is talked about often. It's in the same frame. This is a company that I'm newly in love with. This is in India. It's called G-Auto, and it's a peers incorporated organizational structure of auto rickshaws. And G-Auto has 15,000 rickshaws in the network and moving 4.5 million passengers every month. But all of those auto rickshaw drivers are independent owners and operators. So it's a very loose collaboration, federation of what's happening. And here's another interesting one, U-Ship. U-Ship is for freight. And so it turns out that 30% of all freight trucks are running empty. So there's this huge amount of excess capacity, 30% of the trips. And so U-Ship lets the person, the trucker who has an empty ship, an empty boat, empty truck, an empty truck put in his emptiness, and other people are saying, I want to use that. And they are transporting, they have millions of people who are doing this around the world. It's a gigantic company, all based on excess capacity and other people's trucks. U-Ship doesn't own one truck. So all of this has to do with sharing, and I want to tell you my favorite example to get it deep in your mind. So if we think about bed sharing, so all of you guys think about bed sharing. You got that in your mind? The kind of bed sharing I'm talking about is when I go to new cities. I like to stay at a friend's house, and I get to stay in their excess capacity, the bedroom that their child maybe no longer lives in, or the bedroom that they have as their office. And if I'm lucky, I might get a nice place like this. If I'm less lucky, or if I'm more lucky, I get a double bed, which is even better. Excess capacity double bed for myself, better. And if I'm unlucky, the teenager was kicked out and they say, Robin, you can sleep here. And I think, ugh, those sheets are so dirty and I definitely don't want to sleep in that room. And so that's why hotels were invented. So when I went to a city and I didn't have a friend, I could stay at a hotel. So hotels are bed sharing. When I was starting with Zipcar, I would forbid my staff to use the words car sharing, because I said no one likes to share, and it means that you're going to have to wait your turn, and it's going to mean that it's dirty. And imagine if we called hotels bed sharing, because hotels really are bed sharing. They're absolutely bed sharing. Zipcar is to cars as beds are to hotels. So we weren't that influential. So thinking about bed sharing, I wanted to see which is the largest one in the world. So I went and did some research. The largest bed sharing in the world is the Intercontinental Hotels Group. They've been around for 65 years. And in 65 years, they built 4,400 hotels in 100 countries. And you can see this is hard work. So the Hilton Hotels has been around for 93 years. They are not so big. And so just picture what you have to do to make this work. You have to go find the location. You have to hire an architect. You have to persuade the city to let you do it. You have to get the permits. You have to build the hotel. Then you have to put all the stuff in the hotel. You have to hire the staff and train the staff. You have to hope that actually you chose the right location, because maybe there's a hurricane or a tsunami, or you put it in a bad spot and it fails. And so this is a gigantic amount of work, and that's why it took 65 years. Like, it's a lot of work to do. Some of you will know the next slide. The largest hotel bed sharing in the world is a company called Airbnb. Airbnb, you put your own spare room or your own house and let someone rent it. And in 4 years, they had the same number of rooms available for rent. And this is where I had to say, wake up. It's like amazing, amazing, amazing that in 4 years, they built something that took 65 years for the other company to build. It is a completely transforming, amazing thing. Like, how does that happen? And there's even a company that was bigger called Couchsurfing, where you don't pay any rent, and you might be staying on their couch. And in their 9th year, they had 2.5 million places to stay in every country in the world. Like, it is a totally new way of doing business. Every kind of business, everywhere, every place. So what's going on? Like, why is this happening? So here's why I think it's happening. If you think about why did we invent companies ever? We invented companies to do things that we as individuals couldn't do. They were bigger. Why did we invent government? To do things that individuals couldn't do. So what is it that they can do well? What are industrial strengths? They make large investments. I, Robin Chase, don't have very much money. I can't make large investments. They make things that take lots and lots of years. We as individuals, we're sort of okay at doing things for lots of years, but mostly we like to do much shorter projects. Things that require many kinds of intelligence all together, working together. I'm only smart in 2 things, and you need a lot of people to be smart in many, many things. If you need things that have to have standards and consistency, I can tell you what to do, but I'm just Robin Chase. Who cares what I say? You know, you have to be a big company and a big thing to say, this is the way you're going to do it. This is the standard. And this is typically all kind of put together in a brand. Like we say, this is the brand promise you can trust. This is the quality of this. And that's what big companies do, and these are global. But on the other side, individuals like us, we actually do some things really, really well. And we do things that companies can do, but they hate doing because it's expensive for them. So what do we do as individuals? When you have to do lots of small things, big companies hate doing small things. If you want to do things that are local, they don't like doing things that are local. If you need to do specific, unique, customized one-of things, we are really good at doing that. If you think of the industrial products, everything is the same. And what we can do easily and cheaply is make things that are very unique. And of course, we can tap into my personal social networks. You know, all the companies want to know who are Robin's friends and does she talk about my company? Well, of course, I talk to my friends about things all the time, so, and I'm local. So when we put these two things together, in fact, they're very symbiotic. They're very complementary. They work together really well. And it's this combination that I'm calling Peers Incorporated. It's this new way of building things. And so what happens is the incorporated side does what it does best, and it builds a platform for participation. It puts all those hard things that it knows how to do and that are hard for individuals and makes it into the platform. So if we think about Zipcar, we made the technology so you could unlock the door. We got the fleet card so it's easy to do gas. We bought the cars. I mean, we did things that were very expensive and hard for people. But our members did for us things that were hard for us, that saved us a lot of money when we had them do it. When they put the gas in instead of the company, much cheaper. When they walk around and tell us that it's good instead of me sending someone to do it, much cheaper. So we had the individuals do things that were expensive for us. And individuals bring this diversity of offering, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So I see this, to make it less complicated, as a very complementary new organizational structure that each side has to share value with the other, and each side is working together and is all swimming in a sea of excess capacity. And why I'm very interested in the excess capacity part is that it's very resource and cost efficient. This is going to happen because when you share cars, your own personal car is being used 5% of the time. Shared cars are used about 50% of the time. So you get much, much more value out of that car when it is shared. There's three ways to look at sharing excess capacity. You can slice that excess capacity, which is what Zipcar did. Before, you had to buy a whole big car, and Zipcar said, you know what, we're going to give it to you in little pieces, which is how you want it. And that was a fabulous thing. We all were happy. What does Airbnb do? Airbnb takes all these little tiny houses and individuals around the world, 650,000 of them, and makes them onto one platform, so it's easy for me to search and find and compare and contrast and interact with them, so they aggregate. And the third thing that we do with excess capacity is open it, and I will tell you what that is in a minute. So opening it is, if you think of open data, when the government opens up data, now anybody can use it. And when you open something up, it says you can use it in any way you like. If you think of Airbnb, people are still using it just to sleep in a bed. And with Zipcar, they're still using that asset just to drive. With open things, we're saying, I have no idea what crazy idea you're going to do. You can do anything you want with this asset. You think up, you get new values out of it. So let me see what else. So if I go to this incorporated piece, if you develop a platform, platforms, because they're platforms, can grow incredibly fast and can give you these economies of scale. And let me show you this fast growth. So Etsy is a company where people sell their things that they make to other people. This is Etsy's growth curve. And they grew 50% last year, which is incredible. So of the $1.35 billion worth of sales, half of those people were selling things that they never sold to anyone ever before. So Etsy is providing this amazing service for individuals to sell their stuff. This is a very funny company called Fiverr.com. It started out with what would you be willing to do for $5, to earn $5. Today it is much more expanded. You can sell any types of services, short, very small pieces of services online. And again, these companies are growing incredibly fast because it's all these people coming together on a platform using their excess capacity. And the third piece is peers deliver this diversity. And when you have diversity, it definitely gives you innovation, and it gives you resilience, and it gives you redundancy. And let me just talk about that. If you think about smartphones, the platform is your smartphone. The excess capacity was if you're only going to use it for phone calls, it's not very many hours in a day that you're on the phone. But because they opened it up, and now you can have all these apps built on top, there have been as of today, I think 2 million apps built on using ways to use your smartphone. So it's minds, many, many minds around the world thinking, what could I do with this smartphone? And they're coming up with 2 million ways that we can use it. And you can think of all sorts of ways to use it are really stupid and are not worth $600 to buy my phone, but it doesn't matter because you already paid for your phone. So all of this is extra value being pulled out of your phone, extra value. And then the company I launched in France 3 years ago called Buzzcar, which is peer-to-peer car sharing. And so instead of Zipcar, which rents out cars that the company owns, Buzzcar lets you rent out your own car to your friends and neighbors. And again, we did all the parts that people couldn't do. We negotiated the insurance, we built the website, we do the marketing, and individuals supply their own cars. And when we did this, these are pictures of owners in front of their cars. And you will see that they are a very diverse, oh, I've got to go slowly, you have to see these pictures. So you will see that they are a very diverse group of people. The cars are parked, this is the south of France, of course. You can see that they are all kinds. Cool people and not cool people. And hipsters. And so what's interesting with Buzzcar is that it's in France, and we have 7,500 cars that belong to other people parked across the country, and about 60,000 people are members to rent them. But what makes me really happy is that people are renting cars in places where you would never have a car rental company, and you would never have a car sharing company, because you could never afford to build one in that place, because it was the demand is so low. But for you as an individual, if you rent your car once a month, great, that's excellent. And if you live in a dense urban area, you can rent it out 4 times a week. But it's because it's built on excess capacity, we can offer car sharing everywhere throughout the country. So it's the diversity of offering that makes this such a wonderful thing. So now, I'm going to tell you, I'm about to make you feel very, very bad, and then I will make you feel very happy afterwards, okay? So get ready to feel very bad. A very significant piece of my work is around climate change. And I want to tell you about climate change and make you realize the seriousness of it, and then this will all make sense, how it all ties together in a minute. So the World Bank wrote a report, I think 2 years ago now, and it was 4 degrees turn down the heat. Do you guys work in centigrade or Fahrenheit here? Perfect. So why 4 degrees? 4 degrees is how much warmer, global average warmer, that the world will be by 2100 if we continue to do business as we are today. If you are like me, what does 4 degrees warmer mean? I have no idea. Like, what does that mean? So I went and did some research. The last time it was minus 4 degrees was the last ice age, and that was 15 to 25 million years ago. And in North America, not here, but where I live in Boston, it was under several kilometers of ice. So standing in Boston with minus 4 degrees with several kilometers of ice. But we did the transition from Boston being under several kilometers of ice to today in, as I said, 15 million years. We are going forward that amount in 85. And when I was thinking about that, when I was reading this report, this plus 4 by 2100, which is terrifying, over land it is of course warmer, obviously. Going to be plus 6 degrees warmer over land by 2100. No humans have ever existed at plus 6 degrees. It never has happened. This is in 85 years, if we continue as we're going. And that is if every country does everything they promised to do. If they don't do everything they promised to do, we will be at plus 6 degrees by 2060. That is 45 years from now. when people talk about do this for your grandchildren, I think, how much older are you planning to be? I intend to live for another 10 or 15 years, and if it's going to be plus 6 degrees by 2060, it's going to be plus 3 in 15 years. That is terrifying. So I'm trying to encourage you to not think this is something that for some other time. These numbers are the real numbers. I've done very good research, and I just 2 weeks ago had one of the best scientists in the US look this over to make sure that and he made not one change. This is what scientists are saying. So the way you're feeling now, I want you to remember it and go out and act on it. And I have 3 children, and this makes me cry. It's bad for me, and it's worse for them. The difference between the goal around climate right now is to keep it to just plus 2 degrees instead of plus 7. This quote is from a report that just came out 3 months ago. The difference between plus 2 degrees and plus 7 degrees is the difference between driving on an icy road at 30 miles an hour versus 90. It's risky at 30, and that's the goal we're going for now, right, is risky, but it is deadly at 90. No one is saying this out loud. Deadly. No humans. Deadly. It's the end. These are the scientists from this report saying out loud, not buried in 3,000 pages worth of stuff. This is what is happening. So I have a good friend, and he has this very good sentence. He says, you can't solve exponential problems with linear solutions. This is a true point. This is really exactly, we're in an exponential problem. I think of the size and the scale of the world, and the size of Mexico City, and the size of Boston, and New York, and Lagos, and Mumbai. It's an incredible, phenomenally large, horrible, giant problem. How are we going to do this? And this is why I was just telling you about Peers Incorporated. Try Peers Incorporated. So I want to tell you about the fact that there are 3 miracles with Peers Incorporated, and this is what is giving me hope. And when I think about the work you do, transit and buses and car sharing is a form of Peers Incorporated. You are creating a platform for participation that is making very, very easy for people to do things very efficiently and the much more resource efficient and better for the environment way. So let me tell you about the 3 miracles. Number 1, we can defy the laws of physics. I told you about Airbnb. So imagine that I'm Robin Chase. Imagine we're in 2000, and in the year 2000 I say, you know what? I want to build the biggest hotel chain in the world, and I'm going to do it in 4 years. Everyone in this room, all of us would have said, impossible, Robin. You cannot move. You cannot build that quickly. You cannot move the atoms that quickly. You can't do that in 200 countries and build all those hotels. Every one of us would have said that that is physically impossible. And yet Airbnb did it. So let me just orient you to this graph. This is business as usual, building a hotel chain. The first 4 years would look like this inflection, building one hotel at a time, how you would do it. This is what Airbnb's business looked like. It's incredible. A friend of mine has built the largest ride-sharing company in the world in France right now. It's called BlaBlaCar. Ride-sharing is when I have my car and I'm driving from one city to another and I have excess capacity, 3 empty seats around me. So BlaBlaCar is now moving. It now has 12 million people who are members. It is moving 1 million people every month. It's based in France, but it's throughout Europe right now. And so they move 1 million people a month, which is the same as 2,500 high-speed trains, or the same as 2,500 747s. And they move all those people every month without building one track or buying one train car. Like, it is a phenomenal thing when you get this going. So that's miracle number 1. Miracle number 2, we can tap exponential learning. We can learn really, really fast. So here's an example that I really love. Has anyone in this audience heard of Duolingo? So Duolingo is free online language instruction. This company is 3 years old. I was talking to its CEO. When you're learning a language, The metric for skill is what you can learn in one university semester, which is 130 hours. So how much language can you learn in 130 hours? Before, the most expensive fancy company was called the Rosetta Stone. It's been around 20 years, and it's sold in airports. It's bought by diplomats and businessmen and the World Bank. They use Rosetta Stone to train people. And they use it because it only takes 54 hours to learn one semester of college language, which is pretty amazing. Duolingo, after a year and a half, can teach you that in 34 hours. Why can it do it in 34 hours? Because when I was talking to the CEO, he can conduct 100 experiments simultaneously. Each experiment is done by 150,000 people. And in 48 hours, he can tell you precisely how to teach you better. So he has it down to 34 hours. This is a Google Trends map, and it's just to show you, as an entrepreneur, this makes me very, very happy. So the Rosetta Stone, and as an old company, it makes you very unhappy. So the Rosetta Stone has been going along beautifully. This is how many people search for Rosetta Stone online. And Duolingo comes out of nowhere. The product launched, I think, in October 2012. And look what they did. And this is actually a year old. I want to show you this amazing graph. So they launched in August of 2013. And so you can see here how many monthly people, how many millions of people they had per month. And when I had this graph from 2013, it was 8 million, which was really amazing. 8 million in less than a year. I talked to that CEO last week. 50 million people are using Duolingo to learn a language. And it's for free. And it's 34 hours to learn a language for a semester. It is incredible, and it's because the platform is now organizing and seeing all the learning that's happening around. So the platform can get better, and it can understand how other people do it better, and make everyone learn it that better way. Miracle number 3 coming up. I don't know what to call this yet. So we are stronger than Superman. So here we are, superheroes. All of us actually walking around right now are stronger than Superman. I was thinking about this. Superman just has his own self, and he's kind of there with his own muscles. But when I have my smartphone, I have access to the world's intelligence at my fingertips. And not only do I have access to the world's intelligence, I have access to all the people who have put their knowledge into the internet. So do you guys know Waze, the company Waze? So Waze, the online navigation system. So just think what it's doing. One is it's doing all that complicated computational stuff. It's using satellite data and real-time data, and Waze has 50 million users. So Waze is getting all the trips from 50 million people and able to tell me, oh, it's Monday at 9:30 a.m. The fastest route Monday at 9:30 a.m. from here to someplace else in Mexico City is this way. So it's taking all the trips of all the previous people, sorting, analyzing, and then it says to Robin, here's the trip. That makes me superhuman. But we are better than superhuman, because when there's a disaster like this, there's a person who uses Waze half a kilometer in front of me, who says to me in real time, hey Robin, there's this big disaster, turn off the road. And that makes me superhuman. We now have individuals who are in the environment who are doing things that computers can never do. They're doing pattern recognition in real time that only humans can do. So when I think about our need around climate change, we need to have these platforms for participation that can grow very fast, with lots of people doing things where we can learn very fast from how they're doing it. And at the very edges, in each little location, in each neighborhood, in each continent around the world, you have this local adaptation and a real person on the ground figuring out how it works exactly in their neighborhood. And so here's Waze. This is kind of hard for you to read, but what it's saying is that every 1.7 seconds, a person live is reporting an event. They're reporting a traffic jam every 4.2 seconds, a road hazard every 7 seconds, a policeman every 10 seconds. These are things that only humans can be doing. It's not just Robin going with her smartphone in my car. These are things that required a real human to give this information in real time. So we have this, we now are merging computers and humans in this amazingly powerful way. That we're networked together, we're getting the best of computation, and we're getting the best of what each one of you guys as an individual has to offer. So this is this growth chart for them. I'm laughing that this was January 09 to November 10th, and they were very impressed, and it was impressive, their growth. And between November 10th and today, it's 50 million users. So these things, when you get the platform right, which is very hard, they grow incredibly fast. So the Peers Inc. thing is a collaboration, and I feel like this is one of the most important things that I want to get across to you, is that it requires the platform built by the institution or by the government and people or small companies. None of these things can be accomplished without both sides working together. So we defy the laws of physics. The platform is organizing all of those assets, and it's the individuals that are co-investing very quickly in real time. So for exponential learning, you have hundreds of thousands of simultaneous peers working on something, but it requires the platform to do the analysis and to figure out what are the best practices and what are the worst practices, and to make sure everyone understands them. When we think of these superhumans, it took the platform, as I was saying with Waze, all of that computing power and the peer learning to give me the first cut, but it takes a human on the ground in real time to do the second one. And this is why I think we're going to be able to address climate change in the pace, in the scale and the pace we need. But it requires us to start thinking in this form. We have to start thinking about where are excess capacity? Where can I find excess capacity? How do I make it open so people can start using that excess capacity? What are the platforms I need to build so that everyone can get onto it? And what do I have to make sure to leave to individuals to do, because they do it so much better, faster than the organization, the bigger organization. So your to-do list, here I just said it, identify excess capacity, identify the local, customized, specialized resources that are better done by peers, and figure out, that should be number 3, figure out the things that should be put on the platform. So to figure out, to look at these problems and say what things should be done by the big guys and what things should be done by the little guys, and then make these platforms so that the two can come together. It's a new way of thinking, and because we are so connected today, that's why it works. When we were not connected, you couldn't do this. But now that we are connected and you can have access to knowledge very fast, it can happen. So let me see what my last slide is. This young guy, Tim DeChristopher, was the first person in the United States to get arrested and go to jail for fighting climate change. And he has this sentence: "We're on track for such rapid and intense change, we might as well steer towards the world we want to see." So as we all know in our lives, things are moving very, very quickly, so we need to be building every day the place we want to be living in. We have to be making this world moment by moment. And I want to leave you with my last slide. So for Zipcar, in terms of environmental benefits, each well-shared car is used by 30 to 40 people, actively used. Each well-shared car removes 15 cars off the street, because 40% of the people that share that car say, I don't need to buy a car, and I'm going to sell my car if I already had one. So for Zipcar, I just had these numbers. If we have 10,000 Zipcars, it means that 150,000 cars were not bought. And for each car, it's 3 parking spaces. So it's 450,000 parking spaces that are not needed around the world in these cities. And so we have room for things like BRT and bike lanes and more trees and wider sidewalk when we get all of that parking storage out of the streets. And each person who drives a Zipcar drives 80% less than they would if they owned their own car. And they drive 80% less because when they have to go on a trip, When you drive your own car, you think, oh, it's just the cost of gas. You get in the car, it's just the cost of gas. But it's not the cost of gas, right? It's a lot more. So when people are choosing a shared car, they're experiencing the full costs of that trip. And so they say, wow, it's $10 an hour to rent this car. That's too expensive. I'm going to take a bike, I'm going to walk, I'm going to go take a subway. So they only use cars when it's the right thing. So as I say, they reduce their miles traveled by 80%, which, I'm trying to remember these numbers, something like 1.7 million metric tons of CO2 have not gone into the atmosphere because of Zipcar. So think about all those environmental benefits. Now, my last slide. One day at Zipcar, we got an email that was sent to info@zipcar.com. So nothing in particular happened. It wasn't written to me in particular. It was to the company, info@Zipcar. This slide is the entire email minus their name. Have I told you lately that I love you? And I'm leaving with this because I want to tell you that this world that we're going to, that is more environmentally sound and more sustainable, is better and nicer and fantastic, and we can get people to write us love letters. So we shouldn't be afraid about it. We can do these things and do them quickly, and we can produce a world that is a better place. Thank you.
Vamos a pasar a continuación a la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Por si alguien necesita realizar alguna pregunta, por favor levante su mano.
Ya.
Perfecto.
I don't have my translation, but tell me.
While listening to you, I was thinking and comparing a city that depends on cars, like Boston, say, or a city that still, fortunately, depends on public transportation, like Mexico City. So what would be your upper threshold estimate of the, forgot the name in English, the modal share in Boston by using shared cars versus public transportation, and same of cities like Mexico? Another thing that I was thinking is the success of a car sharing program depends on urban density, but the use of cars tends to lower urban density. So how do you manage those?
So thinking about, I have the answers to some of that, so some numbers. As I said, car sharing only works in places where you don't need a car to get to work. That also means that it works in university towns because there's such a density of students, faculty, and staff that don't need a car to get to the university. And so Zipcar is successful in those two types of environments. And then if we think about Buzzcar, which doesn't have to get, Zipcar and all car sharing companies will only put assets where they can be assured of enough business, which was your point. And so that's where the peer-to-peer car sharing comes in. And so we can provide cars in places that are of inadequate density to support an investment of a car. That's interesting to me. In Washington, New York, Boston, and San Francisco, I know that the rate of car registrations within the city fell between 7 and 15% in those cities when Zipcar existed. And I'm yearning to have the study done to point to Zipcar, but I'm pretty sure it was Zipcar. And it really matches the numbers of members we had and the car displacement that we said was happening. So if I think about Mexico City, and one thing that's probably in your minds is that there's this idea that when people get rich, they want to have a car. And I think that is not true anymore at all for young people. And I think it depends on how you brand the car sharing. So for me, Zipcar was the financially smart, very cool, urban thing to do. If you were a cool, urban, smart insider, you would absolutely do car sharing. And I think of it as the highest status of car ownership because I can drive a different kind of vehicle anytime I want. I never have to do maintenance. That's someone else's job. Like, don't ask me to be washing a car or taking it in to get repaired. That's someone else's problem. And I have a fleet of cars at my service. So not only can I use the right car for the right trip, I was in London last week and I saw so many Zip vans across the city, so vans that people are using for travel. So it is a much higher status of car ownership, and I think it comes down to how do we market it, and do we do a good job marketing it that way? And I was thinking, if I were a Chinese mother-in-law, I want my son-in-law to be the one who uses car sharing and doesn't waste his money on a car. So, yes.
What is your take on Uber and Lyft?
So Uber and Lyft are website and app technology where they have what I think of as peers, independent drivers who are doing the taxi service. And right now, those two companies, it's independent people using their own cars to do it. In principle, I think it's a good idea, but there's a lot of, I want to say, I have a lot of gray feelings about it. There's been a lot of bad behavior with insurance, that they have been lying to the car owners and the car passengers about the insurance on those cars, and it makes me very angry that they are taking a risk with people's lives and with the car owners' second most, probably the thing that's the most expensive asset they own. And so that really made me angry. So for the first year or so that they were operating, they had terrible insurance, and now they have improved their insurance. The two companies operate quite differently in that, I'm saying this on stage now, Uber treats its drivers miserably. They are really mean and horrible. So for their drivers, they cut them, they don't care about them at all. And Lyft thinks of its drivers as its partners. And so I see these two companies as having very different cultures and very different ways of thinking about the peers. And so for Lyft, those drivers are their partners, and they're trying to make their lives better and make decisions that enhance them. And for Uber, they think of the drivers as discardable whatever, and they change prices, they change the quality, the rating service, and they change the size of their fleet on a dime. So I feel quite differently about those two companies. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sí, si me permiten, si nos dan un segundo para pasarles el micrófono, y si nos hacen el favor de identificarse, sí, su nombre y de la empresa o de dónde vienen, por favor.
Do you have a microphone?
Robin, since you mentioned climate change is a major reason for Zipcar should be successful, can you share the progress you made to introduce electric cars in your company application?
So what do I think about electric cars or electric cars in the...
Yeah, have you applied some electric cars in your fleet?
So electric cars, in 2002, in the Zipcar fleet in Boston, I had 2 or 3 electric cars, and I will tell you with sorrow that they were the last cars taken out of the entire fleet. So they would be the absolute last cars. And I was once giving a talk a long time ago to an audience at Yale University, and I was saying that Zipcar was very environmental, and a person in the audience stood up and said, "You lie!" And I thought, whoa. So when I think about Zipcar and electric cars, one is, as I said to you, the biggest environmental win for Zipcar is that people reduce their miles traveled by 80%. That's by far more important than any kind of vehicle we have. But today, we are now 2014. The electric cars, I think, are much more accepted. And in Nice, France, an electric car sharing company started, I think it was called Blue Cars, in 2012. And it was adopted in a flash. And so I think people are ready now to use electric cars with much less fear than they were before. We do know that the whole idea of distance, range anxiety is a complete lie, that 85 or 90% of people's trips have nothing to do with that longer distance. And I think electric cars are really well suited for car sharing fleets, because then you can address that idea in people's mind of range anxiety, that you can, since you have a complete fleet, if you need to take a long trip, you can use a combustion engine car, and you can use the electric cars for your daily, all your trips. Other questions?
Hi, Robin. Nice to meet you. I'm Gonzalo Torres, professor at the University of Anáhuac in Mérida, and I'm an urban consultant for the German DGMB. I want to tell you that we are now, thank you for your presentation, we are now implementing Aventones, which is a ride-sharing platform on Mérida, and we are now planning for a car-sharing carrot, hopefully soon also in that city. So I want you to propose you something and ask you if you are interested in, because all these lovely platforms work kind of independent, and if you would like to work to collaborate on developing a platform of platforms, because we do want to tell the people, come on, get in this website, and if you want to ride with a bus, with our Maya bus, you may make the reservation. And if you want to go to an appointment, then you may take a carrot, and at the end you may come back home by another kind of platform. So this integration should be done. I don't know if you are also planning that in the future. So thank you.
So I see two different questions in there, or maybe I understand two different things. One is there a platform that connects all the kinds of transportation together in one platform? I know that is a goal of just about everyone. When I talk to the car manufacturers, they think, okay, we're going to be the guy who's come up with that platform. When I talk to telecommunications providers, they say, oh, we're going to be the guy who comes up with that. And there are entrepreneurs, I think it's Ride Scout that is out there that has done something like this. One of the things that gives me anxiety when I think about the platform that joins all the transportation platforms is, I'm a startup. How is it that I get into your fancy platform? And because when I think about these platforms, they're choosing all the major big guys, and they make their relationships, and then it's very hard for I'm a startup, like how do I get in there? So I feel ambivalent about that. But stepping away from transportation, the platform of platforms, we're all experiencing and innovating on platforms of platforms. So when I started Zipcar, we had to make our own credit card processing. We had to do our own, email list serve. We had to do our own customer resource management. And today, there's companies that are doing all those small things, so we're all, when we build businesses, using many, many kinds of platforms and many components to pull it together. So I think innovation will be happening at a much faster pace because of all these components. Another question? Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very, very interesting. Very interesting how you are applying these exponential solutions.
Excuse me, your name, please?
My name is Waldo Inclán. I'm a consultant on climate change. But I was wondering, always is very complicated, has been very complicated, how to apply environmental solutions in the transport sector. Many of these solutions are great in terms of the outcomes for transport sector, socially, economically, but in terms of environment are not so great. For example, Zipcar, as you said, is great, but 1.3 million tons in the history is just like a very small and renewable energy project. So what do you think it could be done to get also exponential solutions from the
we know
side?
We know that the thing that we really need to get done is a price on carbon, and I just we do need a price on carbon, and that takes political action. And so every one of you guys should be talking to your politicians and saying, I'm going to hire you because you're doing a carbon tax. It's not that I will fire you when you do that. So I feel like that is the biggest platform for participation of all. We know that. So since I now no longer can. Government isn't moving. Around the world, government isn't moving. So it requires us as individuals to storm the gates, and that's what I feel like I'm trying to offer up. The other piece, I just finished, as of just literally hours ago, I just sent a book to the publisher on this larger topic. And I was feeling very optimistic about it, but as I write this, as I talk to you today and as I think about it, deep in my heart, I do believe that it's not going to be one solution, that it's going to be many, many kinds of platforms, and I have no idea where they're going to come from. And that's why I look at you guys and I think somewhere in this room are some brilliant ideas, and we have to start, they all should be starting small. One of the things about the platforms that, here, I'll tell you a failure of mine. I had started a ride-sharing platform, real ride-sharing, people coming in your car, called GoLoco. And I started it in the US in 2008. I raised money for it. I had investor money. And I built the platform, and my first platform was way too complicated. And then when I started working with individuals, people actually using it, I had to make it much smaller and much simpler, much easier. And so starting with a very, very small thing is required, and then all of these companies, when you look at the growth curves, it takes a while to figure out how the platform works, how much you want the peers to do, how much you want to do. And then once you get it right, once the incentives are right and everything's working, then it has this incredible growth curve. But it does take, Duolingo was like the most astounding thing I've ever seen, but usually it takes like 1.5 years or 2 years, and there's a lot of experimentation, and then it finally goes. So I think we can see this really from any place around the world. It's going to take different kinds of minds. And when I was looking, if you think of CO2, transportation is 22%, which is significant, which is why I think it's really important. But there's all those other places, there's housing, and there's retail, and there's agriculture. So it's going to take a lot of people working. A very sad thing, but I think we can do it still. Any other questions?
La última, por favor.
Yeah.
Hi, Robin. It was really nice to hear your presentation. My name is Fernando. I'm coming from Guadalajara. I'm representing the University Mobility Network. We're organizing between universities to discourage car trips among your house to the university and university to work. And we're trying to promote different alternatives of mobility in Guadalajara. So right now, and taking into account your speech, and I wonder, most of the important sponsors of this event are car manufacturers, car companies as Volvo, Mercedes, that, they hear your presentation, they hear some things like people is gonna discourage about owning a car, and maybe they're gonna be like, whoa, this lady is gonna just getting our business a little bit damaged. So how would you, or how is it Buzzcar or Zipcar focusing in making these individual efforts with industrial strengths, most of them with car companies, in order for them not to be rejecting your project, but to work with you? Because, at the end of the day, they are building the cars. Yep. So how do you work with them and not against them?
When I started Zipcar, I had this nightmare that, have you guys seen the movie The Godfather? I had this nightmare. I knew I was going to be killing the auto industry, and I had a nightmare that I'd be lying in my bed and they would come running into my room with the machine guns. Like, I really felt like, this is so scary what I'm doing. So 2 things. One is, for all of you guys in this room, I believe in my heart transportation is the center of the universe. How happy you feel or how unhappy you feel on a daily basis has every single thing to do with your transportation. So did you get to work easily and simply, or was it annoying and now you're in a bad mood the entire day? When you come home from work, did you get home easily and simply, and are you now happy to be home, or are you just so angry that you're just pissed off? All of your opportunities, your education opportunities. Every single thing you do is transportation working for you or against you? So that's why I love it. Like, it's the CO2 part and the impact on people's lives, transportation is the heart of it. So remembering that, car manufacturers, it's really interesting to me. I spent 2 years ago, I lived in France for 2 years. And in Europe, every single car manufacturer understands with complete clarity that the future of cars is 100% shared and dramatically diminished, that they have to go into the transportation business in a much broader way. Every one of these companies is making significant experiments in ride sharing, in the different types of apps, the interconnected transportation as a service. They are all completely there. I was talking to a guy at Ford who was in one of the senior executives, and I said, so what are you thinking about these days? And he said, every morning I wake up and I think, how can I make sure that this company exists in 20 years? Like, they are completely understanding that this is they have to make this transition or not. And I think probably most of them won't make this transition because they have thousands of employees and they have these big assets that you can't turn. So it is the future. They're all working really hard to come up with how they're going to become transportation companies in other ways. And just think of you guys as bus, the bus and transit part. I feel like a whole bunch of them, a lot of the vehicle manufacturer has to become shared vehicle manufacturer. So shared small vehicles or shared large vehicles, but it's all going to be shared. And if you remember that slide that I started out with the densities of cities, we're only getting more cities that are more dense. And the idea of one adult owning one car, never. One household owning one car, never. Like, it's done. That is done. And so we are moving to a new place. Any other questions?
Una más por acá.
Yeah.
Hi, Robin. My name is Paula. I'm an urban designer living in Chicago. Active Zipcar user. I haven't owned a car in 5 years. The only thing I wish, because today you pick up your car and you bring it back to the same spot. The only thing I wish is that you could do point-to-point Zipcars. Is there any thoughts on advancing how the system operates on that?
Well, so number one, Avis bought Zipcar. I'm not in charge. I haven't been charged for a long time. The idea, the question is, why don't we have one way? For a long time, I didn't want to do one way because it's an operational nightmare. And if you think about bike sharing is all one way. And what we know about bike sharing is that it's very different in every city. And when I was living in Paris, it was the first city that had this spectacular data of what one way would look like. And in Paris, they have to move 30% of the bicycles every day, and it's one person moving 20 bicycles. So with cars, like, that's not a possibility. And so people want to have one-way car rental so that they have a cheaper fare. And I'm actually not that interested in making cars very cheap for you. So the fact that you want to drive to work and drive home and have the car sit there for 8 hours, no one wants to rent the car downtown for 8 hours because everyone's at work. So that said, Car2Go has been doing one way around the world. And every single city is very different. Some cities, it is wildly unsuccessful because people take the car and it sits there for 4 days and no one ever wants it. And in some cities it works fabulously well, which would be Washington, D.C. was their largest, fastest growing city. And so it has to do, each city, as you guys in transportation knows, are very, very specific. Is it mixed use, whatever? And so lastly, Zipcar is doing one-way experiments right now in Boston. I have no idea how it'll turn out. I was thinking of taking one from the airport home when I go home on Wednesday. We'll see. Any other questions?
Esta ponencia.
With this topic, what about this one way, but with multiple choices, like 5 stations or 10 stations. And
If I had to implement it, I would have done it that way. I would have done 2 things. One is one way to facilitate people to a post, I want to go one way, does anyone want to take it back? And we would have split the bill. So one would be open-ended. Say, you know, I want to go downtown, who wants to take the return? And then you wouldn't have to worry about where to park it. And another would be to say, you can always go one way if there's an empty parking spot for you. And so that would be a way that you could control the flow.
flexible stations, not so bad.
Okay, I think that's it. Bye.
Gracias, Robin. Yo quiero agradecer a Robin y compartirles un pensamiento más. La semana pasada estuvimos en una cena en que estaba Al Gore. Y lo que estaba contando en términos de energía es que aparentemente en muy pocos años la energía solar ya va a ser tan barata que no es una pelea ya con las petroleras, sino que simplemente va a dejar de hacer sentido económico tener tanto una economía basada en el petróleo. Entonces, yo creo que todas estas nuevas tendencias de transporte en algún momento están creciendo y como vieran, cuando se hacen virales y cuando se hacen exponenciales, hay cambios muy profundos. Y creo que con tanto que estamos viendo que está pasando en el mundo, realmente en algún momento vamos a poder ver ese cambio exponencial en el uso de la energía y también en el transporte. Y creo que eso es un poco la idea de tener a Robin acá, mover nuestras mentes y pensar que hay muchas más cosas ocurriendo en el mundo en términos de nuevo transporte, nuevas maneras de pensar movilidad. Pues muchas gracias, gracias a Robin.